The patient had already gone home when I discovered his blood type was biologically impossible. I'm Dr. Darius Vex. I've run the hematology lab at Caldwell Medical Center for 9 years, and I've learned that blood doesn't lie. It can't. The antigens in your red blood cells are locked in at conception, coded by genes that don't rewrite themselves on a whim. You're born with A, B, AB, or O. The Rh factor is positive or negative. These aren't suggestions, they're biological law. Tube 447-B sat in the centrifuge bay like every other specimen that Thursday, post-operative panel for a routine appendectomy. I almost deleted the error message without reading it. Critical alert, ABO/RH classification failure. Manual verification required. When I pulled up the full results, I gasped. I didn't mean to, but the patient's blood was testing positive for A antigens and B antigens, and Rh positive and Rh negative simultaneously. According to every immunology textbook I'd studied, this person's immune system should have torn itself apart before they made it out of the womb. Yet, Case Drummond had walked out of the hospital that morning complaining of the discharge process taking too long. I spent the next hour running every test I could think of. Fresh sample from the backup tube, different analyzer, manual slide examination. The results didn't just persist, they got stronger. Under the microscope, Drummond's red blood cells looked normal at first glance, but the longer I watched, the more uncomfortable I became. They were moving. Not the usual Brownian motion you see in any fluid sample. This was different, organized. The cells were spacing themselves with geometric precision, like they were optimizing their arrangement. I've looked at thousands of blood slides. Cells don't do that. By the time I looked up, the lab had emptied. It was past 7. I logged the results as indeterminate pending follow-up and went home. I didn't sleep well. I kept seeing those cells rearranging themselves, finding their perfect positions like pieces of a puzzle solving itself. The next morning, Drummond's file had been flagged. Not for medical review, for administrative correction. The note was brief. Lab error confirmed. Classification updated to O positive per historical records. No follow-up required. I hadn't written that note. I checked the historical records. Drummond's blood type was listed as O positive on a chart from 3 years ago, a routine physical. But that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was the name of the physician who'd signed off on the correction, Dr. Iris Vane, Director of Transfusion Services. Iris never corrected lab work personally. She barely looked at routine panels. I found her in her office, reviewing supply requests with the practiced disinterest of someone who'd been in hospital administration too long. "The Drummond case," I said. "I need to talk about it." She didn't look up. "Machine error, already corrected." That wasn't a machine error. I ran 4 separate confirmations. Now she looked up. Her expression wasn't annoyed or dismissive. It was careful. mysterious. Sometimes the equipment gives us contradictory results. It happens. We document it and move on. The cells were reorganizing themselves. The sample was probably degraded. It was fresh. I watched it happen in real time. Iris sat down her tablet with the kind of precision that meant the conversation was over. The patient is fine. They're home. There's no clinical concern. She paused, meeting my eyes with something that might have been sympathy. These questions come up sometimes. They resolve themselves. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Not the questions, the people asking them. She handed me a printout. The lab has quality metrics to maintain. Error rates affect our accreditation. I need you to be certain before you flag something as anomalous. It wasn't a warning, not quite, but it was close. I went back to my office and did something I probably shouldn't have. I ran a database search across our hospital network for similar cases. Keywords: blood type indeterminate, classification failure, ABO discrepancy. The search returned 7 cases over the past 12 years. Each one had been resolved as a technical error. Each patient had recovered unusually quickly from their procedures, and each file had been personally reviewed by someone in hospital administration. I pulled up the oldest case, a trauma patient from 2013 named Rise Morn, motorcycle accident. Massive internal bleeding. He'd needed emergency transfusion, but his blood type kept testing as incompatible with every unit in our supply. According to the notes, they'd transfused him anyway. O negative, universal donor, 6 units. He'd survived. But the follow-up blood work 3 days later showed something strange. The transfused blood wasn't there anymore. Not rejected, not broken down, just absent. His hematocrit had normalized, but the transfused cells had vanished. The attending physician had noted, patient stable, unclear mechanism, recommend long-term study. That recommendation had been overridden by administration. Patient discharged, case closed. I found Rise Morn's current address in the system. He lived in town, still donated blood regularly, every 8 weeks. Perfect donor history. None of them had ever missed an appointment. I started checking the other cases. Every single patient with an indeterminate blood type result was now a regular blood donor. Not just regular, faithful, the kind of donors the blood bank loved, the ones who showed up like clockwork and never had to be reminded. I thought about Drummond walking out of the hospital, complaining about discharge paperwork. Thought about Rise Morn on his motorcycle, bleeding out on the highway, his body reorganizing itself in ways that shouldn't work. I thought about what happens when you survive something you shouldn't. That night, I did something stupid. I took a vial of Drummond's archived blood and a unit of standard O negative from our supply bank. In my home lab, the one I'd set up years ago for side research, I introduced a single drop of Drummond's blood into the donor sample. Nothing happened. For 6 hours, I watched that sample, checked it every 30 minutes. No reaction, no hemolysis, no agglutination. The cells just coexisted peacefully. Then, around 2 in the morning, I noticed the change. The donor blood was improving. The oxygen carrying capacity had increased by 14%. Immune markers had decreased. The cells were more uniform, more efficient. I ran the numbers 3 times. This wasn't possible. You couldn't just optimize blood chemistry by introducing a contaminant, unless it wasn't a contaminant, unless it was an upgrade. I ran one more test. I checked for the unique antigen markers that make every person's blood individual, the tiny variations that distinguish you from everyone else. They were fading. The optimized blood wasn't just better, it was becoming generic, standardized, like someone had taken a complex system and smoothed away all the interesting parts. The markers didn't fluctuate. They never reversed. They were simply better. I sat in my dark lab watching red blood cells become more perfect and less human, and I finally understood why the hospital didn't want this studied. The next morning, I called in sick. I spent the day reviewing medical literature, trying to find any reference to post-trauma blood type changes. There was nothing. A few obscure papers about immune system shifts after cardiac arrest, some speculation about hypoxia-induced cellular changes, nothing that explained what I was seeing. I thought about calling someone, the CDC, maybe, a research colleague, anyone who might take this seriously. Then I remembered I'd been in a car accident 2 weeks ago, a minor thing. I'd rear-ended someone at a stoplight while checking my phone. I know. The airbag hadn't even been deployed, but I'd hit my head on the steering wheel hard enough to see stars, hard enough that the ER had insisted on observation, hard enough that they'd drawn blood. I pulled up my own lab results from that night. The attending had ordered a complete panel, standard procedure for head trauma. I'd been cleared within 4 hours, sent home with instructions to rest. My blood type was listed as AB negative. It had been AB negative my entire life. I logged into the hospital system and checked my employee health records. My blood type was still listed there, documented from my pre-employment physical 9 years ago, AB negative. But when I searched for the actual results from 2 weeks ago, the ones from the ER visit, the file was sealed, marked as administrative review pending. I tried to access it anyway. Access denied. Contact transfusion services for clearance. I sat at my desk, staring at that message, and felt something cold settle into my chest. The kind of cold that comes when you realize you've been asking the wrong questions. I didn't need to know what I was anymore. The hospital already knew. I tried to remember why I'd been so concerned about blood samples in the first place. The thought felt distant, like worrying about something that had happened to someone else. Drummond's test results seemed less alarming now, just an anomaly. These things happened in medicine. You documented them and moved on. I thought about calling Iris, demanding answers, forcing a confrontation, but the urgency had faded. It felt like too much effort for something that probably didn't matter. My phone buzzed. The text message from the hospital blood bank. Reminder, you're eligible to donate again next week. Wednesday slots available. I'd never signed up for donation reminders. I looked at that message for a long time. Thought about Rise Morn on his motorcycle, showing up every 8 weeks without fail. Thought about Drummond, walking out of the hospital, annoyed but healthy. I thought about all the emergency patients who'd survived because the blood bank had exactly what they needed when they needed it. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again. Calendar notification. Wednesday, 2 p.m. Blood donation. Status confirmed. I didn't remember scheduling it. When I tried to cancel, the system wouldn't let me. Cancellation requires supervisor authorization. I checked who my supervisor was listed as for donation appointments. Dr. Iris Vane. I set the phone down and pulled up the database one more time. 7 cases when I'd first searched. I ran the query again, expanding the date range to include the past month. 14 cases. I stared at that number. In 12 years, 7 cases. In the last month alone, 7 more. I thought about running the search again, checking trauma admissions from the past week, but my hands felt heavy. The screen seemed too bright. It didn't really matter anyway. The patients were fine. They all recovered. They all went home. They all donated blood. I closed my laptop and looked at my hands. They looked normal, felt normal. I'd healed from the accident without complications, without so much as a bruise that lasted more than a day. The calendar notification was still on my cell phone. Wednesday, 2 p.m. I knew I'd be there. I find science and biology great subjects for horror and mystery. While we know so much about human biology, there is a certain element of the unknown that we have yet to unlock. I hope you enjoyed this bio-terror story. Let me know in the comments and subscribe if you're enjoying my channel. It really will help me out in the algorithm. Until the next Dark Veil tale, have a frightfully fun day.